Priestly ministry is a particular calling from God, affirmed by the Church, to be both a sacrament of God's presence in the world and to administer the sacraments for God's people. Sacraments are, you may remember from confirmation class, outward and visible signs of inward and spiritual graces. In the Anglican Church, we recognize 7 or 2 sacraments, depending on who you ask. Some people might say there are 2 plus 5 to kind of differentiate between the 2 core sacraments of baptism and Eucharist, which are recognized by all Christian denominations, to differentiate them from the 5 additional sacraments, things, reconciliation of a penitent, sometimes known as confession, marriage, confirmation, healing, and ordination. In Anglican tradition, we order ministry in 4 broad groups of people: lay people, deacons, priests, and bishops. Lay ministry is the ministry of all God's people, and it is the beating heart of Christianity. It's the ministry all of you do, with all kinds of tasks here at church, in your home, and throughout your life. The call to ordination as a deacon, priest, bishop is a way the church has ordered itself, so it's particular to the church from the beginning. Now, these are by no means the only ministries that God calls people to. Just last night, I was talking with a new friend who told me about how she is increasingly experiencing her care of young children as a calling. That's what she said, the word she used. She's been running a daycare for decades, and yet her sense of call to that work has been strengthening recently. So God calls us to all kinds of things. The call to priestly ministry involves a variety of tasks, the most visible of which is leading worship, often on a Sunday morning. Depends a bit on the denomination, but the sermon is the task of presbyteral ministry that is most often kind of recognized and kind of talked about. I'm grateful for a mentor who early in my training once responded to some concern I had expressed about a sermon, saying, "Just think of it as 15 minutes in your week full of ministry." 15 minutes plus, the hours it takes to create a sermon, but still, his point was well taken. Preaching is just one of many aspects of priestly ministry, and not necessarily the most important. When asked about what he did for a living, one colleague used to say, "I go to meetings for a living." Some days and some weeks, it certainly feels like that. And the thing is, though, for me, meetings, like everything about pastoral ministry, are about relationships. Now, people have often think of that kind of ministry as they know of hospital visiting or taking communion to people unable to attend church, but pastoral ministry extends much beyond those kind of limited moments and often come unexpectedly. Like most clergy, I have a deep reservoir of stories about the most impactful ministry experiences over the years. The through line in all of them is that they always have to do with the people that we have the privilege to meet along the way. I remember, for instance, an elderly woman who I met when I was training, who everyone thought was dying in the hospital. And then she went from receiving prayers at the end of life to going to physio. She taught me that we never really know. I remember the day a school administrator came into the church just to sit in our small chapel for a few minutes, and then told me about the recent death of her first grandchild at birth. Perhaps the first time I experienced the sacred power of storytelling was during a summer internship on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent. I was hanging out with a friend in her family home, sitting around kind of the dining table, as people came and went, big family moving about. And as she told me about her family, she ended up telling me the story of her brother's death from AIDS, which was a big deal back then and in that place. I remember feeling like we were in like a sacred bubble of sorts as the people kind of moved around. And there were tears, but at the end of it, she commented to me that she hadn't told the long version of that story kind of before. And I went home that night feeling kind of heavy. And I remember thinking, I took some of her sadness away. In telling me her story, she gave me some of her sadness, which was okay with me because it meant that she could carry a little less of it. I wasn't ordained yet, but that was the summer when I understood that I was becoming a priest. A seminary prof would remind us that, like any of the sacraments, nothing magic happens with ordination. On the day of your ordination, he would say, if you don't walk into the church a priest, you won't walk out one. There is no magic. One of the little jokes that I think God is playing on me is that the longer I do pastoral ministry, the less I understand it. And I think it's the way it's meant to be with the sacred, that it's meant to be experienced as we grow into less certainty and trying to be with more faithful action. Priestly ministry, the call to priestly ministry, is a great gift, if not an easy one. The church is not easy. Working in the church is often difficult, not necessarily for the reasons people often think. And still the call remains for me and for many others. And so I continue to follow day by day.